At the turn of the 9th and 10th centuries, when the world was still in turmoil, the birth of an empire was about to change the course of history. The Vikings from Scandinavia, these warriors from what is today Sweden and Norway, expanded eastward, aiming for the fertile East Slavic regions in the year 862, according to the chronicle, The Tale of Bygone Years. Slavic and Finnish tribes invited a Viking leader named Rurik to rule them, hoping to end constant tribal conflicts. Rurik and his brothers accepted the challenge, becoming the new rulers of the land, marking the beginning of the state of Kievan Rus. Rurik first established the ruling center in Novgorod, but the real transformation occurred under his successor, Oleg. He captured Kiev and declared it the mother of Rusi. Oleg's ambitions were not just about expanding territory. He also established trade relations with a distant Byzantine Empire, opening an important trade route linking the Norse and the Byzantines, the route from the Varangians to the Greeks. By the year 988, Grand Prince Vladimir brought Kievan Rus into a new era. He formally adopted Eastern Orthodox Christianity and ordered the conversion of his subjects. This action not only strengthened ties with Byzantium, but also deeply influenced Russia's cultural and religious development. But social structure of Kievan Rus was multi-tiered, including ruling princes and boyars, free people known as Slovians, and slaves. Its economy was based on agriculture, trade, and handicrafts, making it one of the significant trade centers of the time. However, by the end of the 12th century, Kievan Rus began to decline. Internal divisions and external threats, especially the invasion of the Mongols, gradually eroded the foundations of this great empire. The story of Kievan Rus marks the beginning of the national identity of the East Slavs and is a testament to the cultural, religious, and commercial exchanges between the East and West. From Rurik's rule to Grand Prince Vladimir's religious reforms to the empire's ultimate decline, Kievan Rus left an indelible mark in history, laying the groundwork for the later Russian Empire. At a pivotal moment in the early 13th century, Genghis Khan unified the Mongolian plateau, initiating the Mongol Empire's large-scale expansion into surrounding regions. In 1223, the Mongol army first demonstrated its unmatched military strength on the lands of Kievan Rus, defeating the local forces. This was just the beginning, as Genghis Khan's grandson, Batu, from 1237 to 1240, led the Mongol army in a comprehensive conquest of Kievan Rus, including the capture of Kiev itself in 1240, leaving behind ruins and fear. Subsequently, the Golden Horde was established in the 1240s, becoming an important branch of the Mongol Empire, named for the Khan's tent, which was typically made of golden fabric, symbolizing power and wealth. The Mongols managed the conquered territories by establishing a hierarchical system, allowed local nobles to maintain their status and power under the condition of paying taxes to the Mongols and providing military support. However, this tribute system placed a heavy burden on the local economy. Mongol rule had a profound impact on the political landscape of Russia, especially accelerating the rise of the Grand Duchy of Moscow. Grand Duke Ivan I of Moscow used his relationship with the Mongol rulers to expand his power. Born in 1288, he ruled Moscow from 1325 to 1340, becoming a key figure in transforming Moscow from an obscure town into the dominion of Russia. His wisdom lay in how he dealt with the Mongol rulers, who were thousands of miles away. He not only paid tribute on time to gain the favor and support of the Mongols, but also actively participated in Mongol military campaigns and helped them collect tribute from other Russian principalities. His loyalty and efficiency earned the trust of the Mongol rulers, and he was appointed as the representative of the Mongols in Russia. This position not only enhanced his influence over the surrounding principalities, but also provided opportunities for the expansion of Moscow. Utilizing this advantageous position, Ivan I began the territorial expansion into the surrounding areas. He cleverly used methods such as purchasing, warfare, and political marriages to bring neighboring regions under Moscow's control, gradually building Moscow into a thriving commercial and handicraft center. By the mid-15th century, as internal strife and weakening occurred within the Golden Horde, the Russian principalities began to seek independence. In 1480, Grand Duke Ivan III of Moscow refused to pay tribute to the Mongols after the Battle of the Ugra River. This essentially marked the end of Mongol rule over Russia. The Mongol conquest and rule of Russia not only changed the political map of Russia, but also promoted cultural and economic exchanges and integration. Trade routes established during the Mongol rule facilitated commercial ties between Russia and the Far East. Mongol military strategies and organization had an impact on Russian military thought, especially in terms of enhancing the mobility of cavalry and the use of long-range weapons. Although this period was filled with conquest and conflict, it was also a key period in Russian history that facilitated profound changes. In the 14th century in Russia, a powerful force quietly rose at the confluence of the Volga, Oka, and Dnieper rivers. This was the Grand Duchy of Moscow, a nation with a strategic location whose development and expansion laid a solid foundation for the formation of the modern Russian state. The descendants of Daniel, especially Ivan I, Ivan Moneybag, and his successors, gradually propelled the Grand Duchy of Moscow to the pinnacle of power through political marriages, warfare, and diplomacy. In 1462, a ruler named Ivan III ascended to the throne of the Grand Duke of Moscow, who was later known as the Gatherer of all Rus. The reign of Ivan III marked a critical turning point. He not only significantly expanded the territory of the Grand Duchy of Moscow, moreover, in the Battle of the Ugra River in 1480, he refused to pay tribute to the Mongol Golden Horde, thereby effectively declaring Moscow's independence from Mongol rule. Under the wise leadership of Ivan III, the Grand Duchy of Moscow annexed key regions such as Novgorod, Tver, Yaroslavl, and others, unifying multiple Russian principalities under his banner. In 1462, a ruler named Ivan III ascended to the throne of the Grand Duke of Moscow. Not only strengthened Moscow's ties with Byzantium, but also provided symbolic support for Moscow's claim to the status of the Third Rome. Ivan III also set about strengthening the centralized system of government, reducing the power of the nobility and enhancing the authority of the Grand Duke. He undertook massive construction projects in the Moscow Kremlin, bringing in Italian architects, transforming Moscow into the political and cultural center of Russia. Furthermore, Ivan III also strengthened the position of Eastern Orthodoxy in Russia, making Moscow the heartland of Russian Orthodoxy. Ivan III's reign not only successfully unified Russia, but also laid the foundation for the establishment of the modern Russian state. His policies and reforms became key political, cultural, and religious cornerstones for the development of the Russian Empire, marking a new chapter in Russian history. In the 16th century, a legendary figure in Russian history, Ivan IV, also known as Ivan the Terrible, began his reign. He ascended to the throne at the tender age of 3 in 1530, and by 1547 he was officially crowned as the Tsar of all Russia. In Moscow's Kremlin, becoming the first Russian monarch to use this prestigious title. During his reign, Ivan IV implemented a series of reforms aimed at strengthening central authority. He established Russia's first permanent army and created the oprichnina system, specifically to combat the power of the nobility. But this also led to what is known as the Reign of Terror, where countless nobles, clergy, and even common people became targets of persecution. However, Ivan the Terrible's ambitions were not limited to domestic affairs. In the 1580s, he dispatched explorers and merchants to expand eastward. Among them, the renowned Cossack leader Rurik successfully crossed the Ural Mountains, conquering the capital of the Siberian Khanate, Kazan, thereby paving the way for further Russian expansion to the east. With the conquest of Siberia, Russia began to establish cities and fortresses in this vast land, and gradually set up administrative institutions, extending its influence to the Pacific coast. This series of conquests and developments greatly expanded Russia's territory and opened up trade routes to Asia, especially the fur trade, becoming an important part of the Russian economy. Ivan IV's reign witnessed the transformation from the Grand Duchy of Moscow to the Tsardom of Russia, and laid the foundation for Russia to become the largest country in the world. His political and military activities had a profound impact on Russian culture, religion, and social structure, strengthening the position of Eastern Orthodoxy in Russian society and laying important political, economic, and cultural groundwork for the subsequent Tsarist era. In 1682, at the tender age of 10, Peter and his half-brother Ivan V began a journey of co-reign on the Russian throne. Ivan was frail in health and limited in intelligence, and the real power fell into the hands of their aunt, Sophia Alexeyevna, who controlled the empire's fate as the regent. Sophia cleverly allied with the Streltsy Guards in an attempt to permanently weaken young Peter's influence. However, Peter's fate was not to be so easily defined. By 1689, Peter staged a coup, ending Sophia's reign of power and forcing her into a convent. This coup not only marked the maturity of Peter's political skills, but also paved the way for his later independent rule. With the death of Ivan V in 1696, Peter finally took the helm of the Russian Empire, alone, starting his autocratic rule, which would lead Russia into an unprecedented new era. To transform Russia into a modern European power, Peter embarked on a grand embassy tour to Western Europe from 1697 to 1698. He visited countries like the Netherlands and England, learning Western technology, military, and administrative knowledge, determined to bring these advanced ideas back to Russia. His military reforms and administrative reorganization, especially the establishment of Russia's first permanent army and the Oprichnina system, greatly strengthened centralization of power. In 1703, Peter the Great established St. Petersburg on the Baltic coast and moved the capital from Moscow to this location in 1712. This new capital became not only the gateway for Russia to open up to the west, but also a symbol of Peter the Great's modernization of Russia in the Great Northern War. From 1700 to 1721, Peter the Great contested with Sweden for control of the Baltic Sea. After years of hard fighting, Russia ultimately won in the Treaty of Nystad, establishing its influence in the Baltic region and solidifying Russia as a major power in Europe. The reign of Peter the Great, though controversial, undoubtedly had a profound impact on the development of Russia. His reforms laid the groundwork for the modernization of Russia, transforming Russia from a marginalized medieval state into a significant power in Europe. In 18th century Russia, the reign of a female monarch changed the course of European history. She was Katherine the Great, born in 1729, reigning from 1762 to 1796, who, with her visionary insight and iron-fisted policies, propelled the Russian Empire to unprecedented glory. Katherine's policy of expansion to the south was particularly notable. In 1768, an epoch-making war broke out between the Russian Empire and the Ottoman Empire, sparked by Russian intervention in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Catherine the Great, the Iron Lady of Russia, led her nation into this conflict for supremacy. In 1770, the Russian Navy achieved a decisive victory at the Battle of Chesma, destroying the Ottoman fleet and establishing Russian maritime hegemony in the Black Sea. The war ultimately concluded with The signing of the Treaty of Kukuk-Kainarka in 1774, in which the Ottoman Empire ceded the Crimean Peninsula and recognized its independence, effectively becoming a protectorate of Russia. Furthermore, Russia gained the right of free passage through the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, marking Russia's status as a major naval power in the Black Sea region. The wisdom and decisiveness of Katherine the Great not only elevated Russia's position on the international stage, but also laid the foundation for her empire's expansion to the south. Moreover, Katherine the Great's reign witnessed the three partitions of Poland. In 1772, Russia reached an agreement with Prussia and Austria. For the first partition of Poland, Russia acquired most of Belarus. In the second partition of 1793, Russia further obtained parts of Ukraine and the remainder of Belarus. By the third partition in 1795, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was completely divided, with Russia annexing most of Lithuania, Latvia annexing most of Lithuania, marking the disappearance of Poland from the map. These wars and territorial expansions greatly enhanced Russia's international status, establishing it as a major power in Europe. The reign of Katherine the Great not only witnessed significant territorial expansion of Russia, but also marked an important period for the modernization of Russian culture and society. Her policies promoted the development of industry and economy, while also strengthening centralization of power. It reduced the nobility's challenge to power. The reign of Katherine the Great was a key period in the transformation of the Russian Empire from a traditional European peripheral country into a modernized great power. With firm determination and unparalleled strategy, she had a profound impact on the course of history in Russia and the whole of Europe. In 19th century Russia, an empire reached the pinnacle of its power under the reign of Tsar Alexander I and Alexander II. In 1812, this empire faced one of the greatest challenges in its history, the massive invasion by Napoleon's army. However, the tide of this campaign turned after the Battle of Moscow, forcing Napoleon to retreat, marking Russia's victory in the Napoleonic Wars. After Napoleon was exiled to the island of Elba in 1814, the fate of Europe was in the hands of the Congress of Vienna. This historic conference began in September 1814 and concluded in June 1850. During this period, representatives from various European countries gathered in Vienna to discuss and devise a plan to rebuild the European order. Tsar Alexander I of the Russian Empire played an indispensable role in the conference. He advocated with a firm stance for the restoration of Europe's legitimate order and successfully pushed for the proposal to establish a European alliance composed of major powers, aiming to maintain long-term peace and prevent future conflicts. The Congress of Vienna ultimately redrew the political map of Europe. France was confined within its 1792 borders, and several dynasties overthrown by Napoleon were restored, ushering Europe into a new era based on diplomatic negotiation and balance. Moreover, Alexander I also advocated for the establishment of the Holy Alliance, emphasizing international relations based on Christian values. This not only reflected his pursuit of an international order grounded in moral and religious principles, but also laid an important foundation for later international politics. With expansion to the south and west, particularly through a series of wars against the Ottoman Empire, Russia extended its influence to the Black Sea region. During this period, uprisings in Poland were repeatedly suppressed, further consolidating Russia's control over Polish territories. Expansion to the Far East and the sale of Alaska to the United States in 1867 reflected Russia's greater strategic interest in the Far East. In the mid-19th century, Alexander II implemented a series of significant reforms, the most notable of which was the abolition of serfdom in 1861, marking a major step towards the modernization of Russian society. Economically, with the construction of the railway network, such as the opening of the Moscow-St. Petersburg Railway, Russia achieved economic modernization. However, These reforms also intensified social contradictions, leading to the rise of criticism and opposition movements against Tarsis. Autocracy. On the international stage, Russia confronted the Ottoman Empire, France, Britain, and the Kingdom of Sardinia in the Crimean War of 1853 to 1856. The outcome of the war was unfavorable for Russia, exposing its military and technological backwardness. Furthermore, Russia actively involved itself in the affairs of the Balkan Peninsula in the latter half of the 19th century, supporting the Slavic people's struggle against the Ottoman Empire, further demonstrating its status as a major European power. The 19th century was a period of contradictions and transformations for Russia. Through external expansion, internal reforms, and active international participation, the Russian Empire solidified its status as a major power in Europe. However, this period also sowed the seeds of social unrest and revolution, ultimately leading to the outbreak of the Russian Revolution at the beginning of the 20th century. In the tumultuous 20th century, Russia and its surrounding regions experienced an unprecedented history, the birth, rise, and fall of the Soviet era. This period, starting with the Bolshevik Party's revolutionary victory in 1917 until the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, had a profound impact on the global political landscape, economic development, social structure, and cultural exchanges. In March 1917, the Russian Empire reached a turning point under the dual pressures of failure in First World War and internal crisis. Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate, and the Russian Provisional Government was established, marking the end of the Tsarist regime. However, this was just the prologue. On November 7 of the same year, the Bolsheviks launched an armed uprising. Overnight, they seized the government institutions and the Winter Palace in Petrograd, declaring the collapse of the provisional government, and the power was transferred to the Soviets. Lenin was then elected as the chairman of the Council of People's Commissars, marking the beginning of the construction of a socialist state in Russia. They immediately withdrew from First World War and implemented land reforms, but the subsequent Russian Civil War was a test for the survival of the new regime. After 4 years of fierce fighting, the Bolshevik government finally consolidated its power, ushering in a new era of Russian socialism. Subsequent Russian Civil War was a brutal struggle between the Red Army and the White Army for the country's future. In 1922, after being baptized by blood and fire, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was officially established, marking the beginning of the Soviet era. Upon Stalin's ascent, the Soviet Union entered a period dominated by an iron will and ruthless policies. Through rapid industrialization plans and collectivization of agriculture, the Soviet Union aimed to catch up with and surpass Western countries. However, this period was also marked by the Great Purge of the 1930s, during which millions perished in political repression. During Second World War, the Soviet Union played a decisive role in the resistance against Nazi Germany, especially with the victory in Stalingrad, which laid the foundation for the ultimate triumph of the war. The Cold War, standoff between the Soviet Union and the United States, defined the international political landscape for the latter half of the century. In 1985, Gorbachev's rise to power brought policies of glasnost and perestroika in an attempt to salvage the increasingly tumultuous state and economy. However, these reforms accelerated the process of the Soviet Union's dissolution. In 1991, the Soviet Union officially dissolved, marking the end of the Cold War and the conclusion of an era. The story of the Soviet era is a thrilling epic, showcasing the pursuit of ideals, the struggle for power, and societal transformation in human history. It not only shaped the destiny of a nation, but also profoundly affected the entire world. As the smoke of Second World War cleared, the Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb in 1949, marking its rise as a global superpower. The ideological confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union led to the Cold War, lasting nearly half a century, with the world divided into capitalist and communist camps. The space race during the Cold War was a significant aspect of the technological and political confrontation between the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, roughly spanning from 1957 to 1975. During this period, both nations fiercely competed for supremacy in space exploration, not only showcasing the astonishing pace of technological progress, but also serving as a stage for Cold War ideological display and national power. In the 1970s, the Soviet economy began to slow down, facing issues of low production efficiency and technological backwardness. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. This costly war lasted nearly a decade, exacerbating domestic, economic, and social pressures. During the rule of Leonid Brezhnev, political reforms stalled, leading to a state of stagnation in the country. It wasn't until 1985, with Mikhail Gorbachev's rise to power, his reforms exposed fundamental problems in the Soviet system, sparking nationalist sentiments and separatism among the republics. On August 19, 1991, the Soviet Union was rocked by a coup initiated by the State Committee on the State of Emergency, attempting to take over the government under the pretext of Gorbachev's health issues. The coup leaders, including the Vice President, the Minister of Defense, and the Chairman of the KGB, declared martial law and sent troops into Moscow. Faced with this sudden threat, Boris Yeltsin, the president of the Russian Federation, stood resolutely in front of the Moscow White House, calling for resistance against the coup. His appeal received a wide response, with tens of thousands of citizens blocking the streets, bravely confronting the approaching tanks and troops. The coup quickly collapsed due to lack of support and public opposition, and by August 21, the coup leaders were arrested and Gorbachev was reinstated. However, the failure of this coup accelerated the process of the dissolution of the Soviet Union until December 25, 1991, when Gorbachev announced his resignation, officially marking the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the end of an era. The Soviet Union officially dissolved, and the Russian Federation, along with the other 14 former Soviet republics, declared independence. Boris Yeltsin became the first president of the Russian Federation, marking the beginning of a transition period, attempting to shift Russia from a planned economy to a market economy. This period of history is not only a story of internal struggle and reform within the Soviet Union, but also a story of the reshaping of the global political landscape. From the opposition of superpowers to the end of the Cold War, from economic difficulties to political reforms, and the establishment of the Russian Federation, this history has profoundly influenced the world's development trajectory, leaving a reflective history from the distant Viking era to the rise and fall of the Soviet Union, and now to the challenges and opportunities of modern Russia. What are your expectations for the future development of this country? Please share your thoughts and feelings in the comments section below. If you like our video, please click like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to continue exploring and sharing more historical stories. Thank you again for watching and supporting us. See you next time.